Hey, Females! So welcome back to Favorite Friday. For the first case for this week, we are going back to Florida. Specifically, we are going to cover a clown killer. Not John Wayne Gacy, this is not a serial killer case, and also, mind you, this is a female murder case. So we're going to cover the female clown killer. You may have already heard this case. Our killer did just get recently sentenced. So it was, from what I found, she did just get recently sentenced at the time making this video. So it might be somewhat fresh for you. If you knew Debbie personally, if you knew Marlene, if you knew anybody involved in this case, always let me know down below. And so with that being said, I'm going to give the lot that is publicly known, luckily, unlike other cases. And I'm going to quit my rambling, and let's get started. We're going to start with Sheila. Sheila legally, not legally, online, if you search Sheila's name, it's Sheila King Warren, right? However, obviously, when you were born, you have a maiden name. So, Sheila, born in 1963, legally named Sheila Debbie Schulter. Debbie, the name Debbie becomes important later, so remember that. Apparently, she gets married to a man by the name of Richard King, where the name King comes from. So she winds up meeting him apparently while she's a teenager. Doesn't specify whether she's like early teens, like 13, 14, or late teens, like 16, 17. But apparently Richard was actually dating one of her cousins at first. And then apparently her attention went to him. He apparently was in his 30s. And then eventually, I guess Richard and that cousin break up. So I hope this is an older, legal consenting cousin, considering he's in his 30s. And then they get together. But it doesn't specify exactly when they get together, like whether she was after 18 or not. But eventually they get together. They get married. Apparently, he gets sentenced to 10 years for having marijuana and apparently a shootout with police. So then I guess Richard at that point was like the sole income. And so Sheila obviously needs to support herself because I guess she didn't have a job at the time because she was relying on Richard. And so she was over here selling things around the house in order to get like a source of income. And so now apparently while Richard was apparently in jail, apparently he had moved from 4 different prisons within the span of 2 years, which apparently is not normal for prisoners even back then. So your boy's moving around a lot, right? So he must have been doing some stuff, but I couldn't find records that far back to see what he was doing. And apparently he was even associated with a KKK club. So that might even be a reason why, because maybe prisoners did not like him because he was part of that Triple K club, right? So eventually he gets paroled. Apparently they wind up getting married in like May 13th, 1987, because apparently like she was pregnant, and I guess they wanted to be married to raise this child together in an unbroken family, even though the baby was obviously conceived out of wedlock. And the baby will be born sometime in August that same year of 1987. So a little bit of Sheila. Sheila apparently actually wanted a more luxurious life because now Richard's out of prison, but he's not making it up. And then also I forgot to mention, Sheila now has a job. Apparently she's working for a man by the name of Michael. Michael, as you can imagine, he's also married. So they're both technically having affairs. She's having an affair on Richard. He's having an affair on his, while Michael, her boss, who the man she's sleeping with, he's having an affair on his wife, Marlene. And so Marlene Mae McKinnon, she was born April 15th, 1950, in Mount Clemens. Her first husband, because Michael's actually not her first husband, she actually gets married to a man by the name of John Arthur Ahrens Sr., which I'm going to pronounce that, when apparently she's a teenager, so that way she doesn't have to go to Europe. So I guess she didn't want to move to Europe, and I guess the only way to stay here in these states, because also this happens in the States, this happens in Florida, was to get married. And I guess to get married, you get married as young as 14 back then. And she winds up having John Jr. on her birthday, actually, April 15th, 1966. Right? And she wants to have another son. Obviously, we already got John Jr. So the second child would be named Joseph Ahrens. Right? You got John Jr. and Joseph. Okay? Sadly, John Sr., the husband, her first husband, winds up dying in a car crash. So she becomes a widow. She's now a single mom of 2 kids. The car crash happened in Texas, by the way, even though this case takes place in Florida. She's now a single mom of 2 kids. She eventually winds up meeting Michael, her second husband, as we now know, and they wind up getting married in 1972. So if I haven't mentioned this before, apparently Michael was the owner of a used car dealership lot, and he was over here pushing back the odometers to make it like they had less miles than they actually did. And also, as you can imagine, this is a crime. He eventually gets caught. He is proven to have done it to his 2 cars, but obviously I imagine he's done it to a lot more than that. And he winds up getting 18 months probation. Apparently he, I guess, was not allowed to own, managing the finances or whatever while on probation. So obviously, well, I'm married, so Marlene, you gotta take over the business. So this gives her official ownership while he's on probation. And then apparently in 1984, Joseph, her second son, apparently he proceeds to stab a man. I assume that man survived, otherwise I would have said he died, and he only got probation for that. So if Marlene's first husband, John Sr., dying in a car crash already wasn't tragic enough, at the age of 22, on September 3rd, 1988, the first son, John Sr., winds up actually dying in a car crash. Same way Dad went out. And then Michael apparently would turn distant after John's death, because even though that was his stepson, he still considered him like his son. Because we ain't got no biological kids together. And that was like my son. I've known him since he was young. And apparently, Marlene would actually try to go on to sue, I guess, like the city, because apparently the block where the car crash happened at, there was a stop sign that was missing, not supposed to be there. And she says that stop sign had been there, my son would still be here. And I don't know the results of that lawsuit. So in 1989, Joseph, the son that is still alive, the one that got arrested for stabbing somebody, is on probation. He apparently gets arrested again on theft charges. But all those charges somehow get dropped in April of 1990. So then I guess like on top of having a used car sale lot, apparently they also had like rental properties. So like apartments that people were staying in, and guess they were evicting people. And Marlene apparently did not like it. And so she actually wanted to sell the rental properties because she just didn't have it in her heart to be over there evicting people. And so then shortly before the incident I'm about to tell you about, she apparently did proceed to tell her parents, if anything happens to me, Michael did it. And so apparently shortly before that, apparently she had actually yelled at Michael in front of his workers, because mind you, he's their boss, and I guess he was humiliated. And apparently he's over complaining to them and saying that he was going to get rich, we assume off life insurance, once he, and I quote, gets rid of that bitch, referring to his wife Marlene as a bitch. So here's the fateful day. The fateful day of May 26, 1990. Sheila would apparently go over to Marlene's house while apparently her surviving son Joseph had a couple friends over. Michael apparently is out of town, allegedly. I guess we assume this is a fake alibi later on to give him an alibi, so that way, oh, it couldn't have been me because I was out of town. Because obviously, people suspect the husband right away, especially if said husband's having an affair. Sheila goes over dressed in a clown costume, and this is where the clown incident comes in. She goes over dressed in a clown costume with balloons, one which says "You're the best," and the other one apparently has Snow White and 7 doors on it, and a bouquet of flowers. Apparently, Marlene is the one that opened the door, according to most sources. She sees the flowers and the balloons. Apparently, she says, "How nice." And then at that moment, while she's over distracted by, actually getting flowers unexpectedly, that's when Sheila apparently shoots her in the face. So then, of course, Marlene apparently falls down. Sheila apparently run back to her white Chrysler LeBaron and her obviously flees the scene. One of the kids inside would apparently get up to see, what that gunshot was. Because again, apparently this is a very nice neighborhood, and apparently like crime really not happen here. So it's like, was that really a gunshot? Let me go investigate. So apparently a metal spoon would then get put into Marlene's mouth to basically stop blood from going to her airways, try to keep her alive, even though she was pretty much a goner at that point. But they didn't know that, of course. And so then apparently 2 people would actually get into their red car and try to actually follow Sheila, but they wound up losing track of her, unfortunately. So then, of course, 911 is called. Police interview everybody at the house, the son and all his friends, and they all pretty much say the same thing, because you gotta get everybody's witness statements. And they all pretty much said it looked like a 6-foot built male, emphasis on built, with brown eyes. And obviously Sheila being a female, that obviously threw the track off her, like, by a lot. I mean, obviously she was average and tall, the average woman, but obviously she's not a male, so that gave her sort of advantage, unfortunately. And so then, of course, as you can imagine, this obviously being a murder channel, Marlene would basically sadly die from her injuries like 2 days after she was shot. Police would apparently find out about the affair somehow, and they're like, oh, well, that's definitely a motive. So they go to Michael and Sheila, and they obviously both, of course, deny the affair, even though there's no way for Marlene to find out because she's now no longer with us. And so then they go to the employees, they're like, what do you know? And all the employees, not just a handful, but all of them were like, oh yeah, they definitely had an affair. They were not hiding it with us. And apparently there was one employee that said she was scared of telling Marlene out of fear she would get fired. Because mind you, Michael's the boss. So what can you do? So then the police apparently are also trying to solve this murder. They apparently go to a supermarket trying to figure out, who the killer is. And so this, of course, being Florida, they have public stores. Like public, but take the C and replace it with X, right? Like they had Publix. So apparently they went to the public store because they were mind you, the clown had balloons and flowers. And they assume, obviously, that's where the balloons and flowers came from. So they talked to employees, and they said that a woman that had brown hair and a ponytail came in about 8:30 on April 26th. So now we figured that out. Now we got to figure out where the clown costume come from, because that's the major part of this. That's how what concealed what they think is a male's identity, even though obviously we know it's Sheila at this point. So then they go to the costume store. Costume owner tells them, yeah, a woman with brown hair came in here. And I remember her because she came in, she was one of those people that came in, right before the store closes. And obviously, before a certain point, obviously the store is no longer take sales. But she pretty much, begged the owner to let her in and, get a costume because it was very urgent. And so she let her in. And so obviously, you doing that, they're going to remember you. And luckily, they did. And so then apparently, police decide, you know what? Sheila kind of has brown hair. So we're going to put her in a photo lineup and have the Publix employees look at her and see if they memorize her. And none of them somehow point out Sheila in this photo lineup. So I guess Sheila apparently was in holding. I guess because none of them could identify her at this photo lineup, she basically was released due to lack of evidence. So the police remember that the couple Marlene and Michael were apparently car dealers because they own the car dealership. So then they go back to, and so they could try to go back in the system, try to see, did anybody own a white Chrysler LeBaron? Try to see, is it possible one of the people that bought a car from you, did they wind up killing you? So they go to an employee by the name of Claude. He basically says that yes, we do own a white Chrysler LeBaron. However, apparently that was a secret car and it wasn't supposed to be known that it was getting rented out, whatever that means. And so apparently they find the white Chrysler eventually, because obviously you can imagine Sheila apparently dumped it off somewhere. They find where she dumped it off at, and they find clown hair in the back seat, along with some brown hair, which we can imagine obviously that's her, but they didn't. This is the 90s. DNA ain't like what it is now. They didn't know at the time. And so one of the reasons why a lot of people believe that Michael was actually involved in Marlene's murder, even though he was not physically there because he was in Miami to give himself a little alibi, is because he proceeds to ask his lawyer, am I still going to get them life insurance? Would I still hypothetically get the life insurance even if I'm the one that killed Marlene? And nobody ever questioned him about that. So fast forward to 1991, apparently there would be an inmate in the state of Maine, which is all the way up above Florida, apparently in jail by the name of Edward Barr, B-A-H-R, Barr, I guess. Apparently he would confess to Marlene's murder because this murder is declared legally unsolved. Also, we know Sheila did it, but police don't know if Sheila did it. So he basically confesses the murder and says, I will tell you everything you need to know as long as you don't get the death penalty. And obviously Florida is a heavily death penalty state. He was not, I guess they did not accept the offer, so he immediately lawyers up. They call the person he claims to be their lawyer, and that man says, oh yeah, I no longer represent him. So I guess whatever he did to get to jail in Maine, it must have been pretty bad enough for his lawyer to be like, yeah, I no longer claim that man. And so he then gets extradited back. He gets extradited all the way down to Florida because it's discovered that apparently around the time of the murder, he was in fact in the state of Florida around the time the murder would happen. So now we definitely are looking at you, especially with you confessing. Then at this point, I guess now he doesn't have a lawyer. He's never talking to anybody, which I guess you have the right to do. However, they have him in Florida on apparently a theft warrant, even though he was currently in jail for something completely different, apparently. And he is in a Florida jail for 5 months despite being subpoenaed. And then apparently he has a garage all the way over in Texas. And apparently they checked that garage while he is obviously incarcerated in Florida. So remember how I said Michael got 18, and actually nothing's really said about what happened with Edward after that. So I just wanted to say that, by the way. And also I imagine Edward was eventually cleared due to what we know now. And so remember how I said earlier Michael got sentenced to 18 months probation due to basically like lowering the mileage on these used cars. Apparently, I guess he was still doing it even though he had probation. So they get him on that again, actually. And so they want to pay him with like hella charges, right? So you ready for this? Racketeering, 21 counts of dominator fraud, 11 counts of grand theft, 10 counts of petty theft. And apparently, if you add all those up, he was about to serve a maximum of about 237 years in jail. So that dude was not going to get out till the day he dies. And the prosecutors were doing this because there was not enough physical evidence to prove Michael was involved in the murder. So basically, he would have got off scot-free, essentially, even though we highly suspect you were involved, as do I. And they were like, yeah, we're not going to let that happen. So we got to get you on something, right? Judge says, instead of that 237 years, I'm just going to give him 20 years probation. So the prosecutor's like, oh yeah, hell no. We're going to appeal this, as they should have, and they did. He gets sentenced to 9 years. I guess like they get a new judge. He gets sentenced to 9 years in jail instead of that 237. But he only serves 3. And spoiler alert, he never served any jail time for Marlene's murder. Just saying that, by the way. So remember how, like I said, Sheila also was actually married to a guy named Richard? Well, they get divorced in 2000. Apparently, once I guess Richard is now dead and Marlene I guess is also dead, Michael and Sheila apparently start seeing each other like publicly, like everybody knows now. Apparently all their employees know. And so they actually wound up getting married apparently in 2002 in Las Vegas. They wind up getting a restaurant together by the name of the Purple Cow, and they apparently run it from like 1996 all the way to 2016. Apparently they were going under the names Mike, which would be a nickname for Michael, and then Debbie. Debbie being Sheila's government middle name, right? And so apparently the case would be reopened in 2014. They apparently would grab some hair from Sheila's. And apparently while working at the Purple Cow, there would be one event where apparently Sheila would actually dress up like a clown, which you're going to see a picture of on the screen now. Okay? Which is kind of eerie considering what she did, right? And so then allegedly, she had apparently confessed to killing Marlene while apparently drunk, and it became a rumor around the workplace. So then, of course, the case would eventually get reopened in 2014. They apparently came and pulled some hair from Sheila, like from her head, and compared it to the hair that was found, the brown hair that's found in the car, it was a match, and luckily that was enough to arrest her. And so originally the prosecution, once Sheila is officially arrested for Marlene's murder, they actually, of course, tried to go for the death penalty. But like I said, with this happening in 1990 and her getting arrested over 30 years later, it was hard to find witnesses who were around at that time that are not dead and could be found. Like the witnesses that were dead were not easily found. So they were struggling with that part. And then apparently there was a guy by the name of John Moran Jr., whose father, so I guess John Sr., had apparently worked for Michael and confessed on his deathbed that he apparently knew who actually was involved in the murder of Marlene. And I guess trying to implicate that it was Sheila that did it. And I heard nothing after him. So then, of course, apparently Sheila's first trial was to happen in 2020, but we all remember, the COVID pandemic. So it gets pushed back to April 9th, 2021. And then I guess there was still like COVID restrictions going on. So it gets pushed back to September 8th of 2021. And then it gets pushed back again to June 2022. And then it gets pushed back again to October still of 2022. And the judge said at the very latest, I want this trial to start January 2023. And so there's one wholesome thing that did come out about this case. Apparently Marlene's surviving son, Joseph, apparently actually started a construction company. And apparently he apparently would thank his mom for giving inspiration. Because I guess when he was younger, she apparently fixed things around the house. And he saw her fix up those things around the house. So that is apparently what inspired him to start his own construction company. So something good came out of this case. And then Sheila, unfortunately, get a plea deal and only get 12 years as part of the plea deal. So she's been out for 30, only has to serve 12. Yeah. So then, like I said, that is the case against the female killer clown. Okay, so like I said, if you were aware of this case, because this case she did just kind of get sentenced not that long ago, so this case is considered somewhat fresh. I guess the end part is considered fresh. And like I said, if you knew Sheila, Mike, Marlene, Joseph, anybody involved in the case, definitely know down below. And so with that being said, after our favorite females 2 times a week, subscribe to my favorite females, and see you guys next one. Bye.